Everybody, welcome. Because there are some new names. My name is Megan Rowe. I am manager at St. Jude Wellness Center. I'm also a registered dietitian, and I have my certification in culinary nutrition. And that happens to be today's topic is culinary medicine. We are going to be talking about food for healing. And if you were in on my anti-inflammatory webinar 2 weeks ago, we talked a lot about all kinds of strategies you can do for inflammation, and food happens to be my specialty, my close to my heart piece of that. So we're going to talk about some of my favorite ingredients today that are really powerful anti-inflammatory ingredients. Now, culinary medicine can go in a lot of different ways. We're not going to be talking about specific conditions today, or really treating anything per se, but we're going to be talking about culinary medicine in a preventive strategy. Ingredients that you can use that we know will help to calm down inflammation when it is rampant and or prevent excessive inflammation, at least within the gut. And just overall really just powerful nutrients. So it doesn't mean that when you eat these recipes, boom, we're going to heal, a flu or anything like that. But when we eat these nutrients on a regular basis, we help empower our immune system so that when we do get a bug or something, we can fight it more effectively. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We have 3 different recipes. Yes, I will send the recipes out to everyone afterward. Sometimes I make tweaks as I go, or I recognize that I have typos, which is why I don't send them out ahead of time. You guys aren't cooking with me, so I will send them out. This will be recorded. With that, just one other housekeeping thing. Hi, Cindy. It's kind of hard for me to see my chat from over here. So if you do have a question, pop it in the chat. If I see it, I will get to it. If not, know that I will get to it at the end. I will walk on over there at the end of class. So definitely type those in. Let's cook. So we're going to make a tofu recipe with a dip. It's actually called buffalo tofu with cilantro ranch. And I kind of took this from Dr. Mark Hyman's recipe database, and I've tweaked it a little bit myself, but that's where the original recipe came from. And I really like it because I feel like tofu, gets a bad rap. A lot of people think, I can't eat tofu because of the phytoestrogens and it's going to give me, hormone imbalance problems, or it's going to give me cancer. Tofu itself is a really lovely plant product. It's one of the very few complete proteins we have in the plant world. It's very high in protein compared to most other plant proteins. It also doesn't have very much, if any, carbohydrate, where a lot of your other plant proteins, like your legumes, are lovely, but they have a lot of carbs. So sometimes you have to kind of balance that out in meals of, okay, my beans are my protein and my carbohydrate. Tofu it's your protein. Now, does it have phytoestrogen? Yes, it does. But what we know from research is that phytoestrogens don't equal estrogen spikes in the body because it's a phytoestrogen. It's not mimicking your estrogen. What it actually does is it can actually block some natural production of estrogen by kind of blocking the receptor. So lots of sciencey stuff, but essentially, I don't want you to fear tofu. I do want you to look for organic tofu. Soy is one of the highly subsidized crops in the United States, which means that they need to make a lot of it and they need to make it cheaply. So how do you do that? You spray it with a lot of pesticides. And a lot of tofus are then genetically modified, not tofus, I keep saying tofu, it's soy plants, are genetically modified to be able to tolerate really high levels of pesticide. So ideally, I don't say across the board you should always be getting organic. I don't think that's realistic, nor do I see the research behind having to do that consistently. Tofu is one of the few products I do think anything soy related, you should be looking for organic, okay, from an inflammatory perspective, especially if you are vegan or vegetarian and eating tofu a whole heck of a lot, then we really want to focus on the organic. If you're having tofu here and there, anyway, so let's get to cooking it, because the other thing with tofu is even if you're on board with it nutritionally and theoretically, a lot of people eat it and they're like, it tastes like nothing. It tastes like bleh. So we want to make sure it tastes really good so that you can eat it. So there's all these different ways to make tofu. I really encourage you to experiment. The soft tofus, you can make like puddings and cool scrambles. We're going to use firm and extra firm tofu today because we're going to bake it. But there's a lot of really cool things you can do with it because it's a blank canvas. Because it doesn't taste like anything, you can add all kinds of stuff to it. So that's what makes it kind of cool. So I had one block. I should have hold on, let me show you. I should have kept my block out. I had one block of organic extra firm tofu. This was from Sprouts. It's the Sprouts brand. I'm not married to that brand. I just happened to be at Sprouts when I did my grocery shopping. I'm just always looking for, whatever store I'm at, is where's the organic tofu and which one is the cheapest of the organic tofus. So this was the Sprouts brand. It is the extra firm one. I prefer that when I'm baking tofu, so that it doesn't crumble. And I took this out this morning around 8, and I drained all the liquid from it, and I pressed it between paper towels, and I left it in my fridge draining. You don't always have to leave it that long draining, but you're going to get the better result when you're baking tofu and trying to get kind of a crispier outside when you've really drained it a good long time, at least an hour, because it is so soaked in water. If you're doing a scramble or a stir fry and you don't really care if it's perfectly crispy, just kind of squeeze it, drain the water out a little bit, and move on. But I do like it a little bit crispy. So they're nice and firm. They're not really watery at all. And then I chopped it up into cubes after that. Okay. So it's just plain tofu chopped up into cubes. And what we're going to do to make sure that when we bake it, it doesn't just burn, we want a good crispy outer layer, is we're going to add some starch to the outside. You can use any starch you want, but because we're going anti-inflammatory for today, I'm going to use arrowroot. I always have a big container of arrowroot in my pantry. This is my starch of choice. You can use cornstarch, you can use tapioca starch, you can use flour. They will all function and work. What I like about arrowroot is it's really minimally processed. There's not a lot of heat or there's no chemicals that go into the processing of it, versus things like cornstarch, where there's a lot that has to happen for corn to turn into a starch. So you're just having a lot more processing points, plus corn, again, is subsidized, so a lot of spray. Arrowroot is not. So you just get a less riskier starch profile with arrowroot, and it works just like all other starches. So I'm going to add about a tablespoon of starch to my tofu. Now the recipe I'm going to send you actually calls for 2 blocks of tofu and about a tablespoon and a half of the starch. So you would be making more. I'm going to make it for my kids tonight, and they like it straight out of the oven. So I'm just doing half of a batch right now for you. I'm going to do my other block later. So just kind of stir. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you don't want to stir too aggressively because we don't want to mush up our tofu. So that's why I like using a spatula instead of a spoon. I like a soft silicone spatula, and just kind of toss a little bit. You could also shake it a bit if you wanted to. And then we're just going to sprinkle with some sea salt. Because we're going to season this up a lot later. So if you were going to eat this really plain, you could toss this maybe with some soy sauce or some balsamic vinegar. We're going to make a dip for this, and so I'm just kind of doing salt and the starch, and that's it. So we're going to put it on a baking sheet. It will stick, so you do want to line your baking sheet with parchment paper. And just, again, be as gentle as you can. You're going to get some broken pieces, and it's fine. Nobody cares. Unless you're running a 5-star restaurant, and I'm not. And if you're running a 5-star restaurant, thank you for being part of my webinar. Okay, spread it out as much as you can so that they're not stacked on top of each other. I forgot my avocado spray. Hang on. Da, da, da. Avocado oil spray or olive oil spray, either one. And just spray a little bit. We're going to put this bad boy in the oven that's already been heated to 400 degrees for a total of 30 minutes. Halfway, we're going to give it a little bit of a toss just so that it gets a little bit evenly baked. But that's it. It's so easy. So I'm going to set my timer for 15 minutes. Just so I remember to stir it a little bit. That is your basic, oh, hold on, I got hair in my eye, sorry. That's your basic formula for baking tofu. That's it. So you can add different seasonings to it, a little bit of sauce to it, but that is how you get a really nice, now it's not gonna be crispy. We're not doing fried tofu, but it's gonna have that kind of nice, harder layer on the outside, and we're gonna use it almost as a dipper for the dip that we're gonna make. So I'm gonna set my tofu bowl aside. We'll use that later. And we're gonna make the dip for it so that it's ready for us when the tofu comes out. So we're gonna do a lot of blending today. The reason for that, well, A, is we're gonna make some delicious sauces and things like that. But also from a culinary medicine perspective, anything that's blended or pureed or liquefied is just easier to digest because you've done some of the processing, in quotes, we're not ultra processing, but you've done some of that processing for your body. You're not having to break down the tough fibers. So while we love fiber, and I do encourage you to eat whole foods that you have to chew and crunch, if you're sick, you just came out of being sick, if you have GI issues anyway, which a lot of us do, you might have trouble digesting and absorbing all of your nutrients in whole food form all the time, especially if you're someone who tends to get bloated a lot. So if you do have IBS or GI stuff, or you are just coming out of a sickness of any kind, I recommend a lot of liquid or purified foods. Not all, you don't have to be on a puree diet, but some sauces and soups and smoothies. That's why soups are so lovely when we're sick, is because they're really tolerable on the GI tract and they're easier to then absorb the nutrients in our system, because everything's already kind of broken down for us. So we're gonna make a sauce. We're going to do a cilantro ranch sauce. So we're gonna do a half cup of either mayonnaise or plain Greek yogurt. Now mayonnaise, if you're going to go with mayonnaise, I highly recommend one that has avocado oil or olive oil as the oil, and not canola or grapeseed or anything like that, because those are gonna be your healthier anti-inflammatory mayos. Personally, I kind of like using plain Greek yogurt in this dish because we're going to mix it with tons of other flavors. And then we're getting protein bonus in our dip, which is always a great thing because most of us aren't getting enough protein. So we're going to do about a half a cup. This is just Fage, am I covering it? Fage plain Greek yogurt, 2%. So the key is plain. Do not use vanilla Greek yogurt for this dish because it's supposed to be savory. We're adding cilantro and things. That would be kind of gross with vanilla. Try not to be such a mess like I am. And this is just going to make this nice creamy dip. So that's a nice tip for you, is if you are ever making something creamy and it calls for sour cream or mayonnaise, you can almost always replace it with Greek yogurt. If you are dairy-free, then you could do the avocado oil mayonnaise, or you could use a dairy-free yogurt. You could use soy yogurt, you could use coconut yogurt, I guess. You just want to, again, make sure it's unsweetened, okay? So you have half a cup there. We're going to do a quarter cup of coconut milk. I have a can of light coconut milk that we're going to use for our soup later, and I'm just going to add a little bit of that. I'm not even going to measure, but about a quarter cup of that. Again, that kind of adds to the creaminess, and we're wanting it to be a dip that's not quite so thick as the yogurt. So that's really the only purpose that creates. From an anti-inflammatory perspective, coconut milk is really lovely because it has medium chain triglycerides. These are fats that easily transport across the blood-brain barrier, so they're used, they're not stored. So we don't store MCTs, we use them. Our brain, our cells use them. That's why coconut has kind of a health halo, even though it's a saturated fat. So if you're not using it all the time, if you're kind of adding it here and there, quarter cup here, a little bit there, it's a nice way to get good, healthy, usable fats that our cells can use. Plus it tastes good and it's creamy. Then we're going to do a quarter cup of lime juice. I already squeezed some, so you don't have to watch me squeezing that. I'm just eyeballing because I make this a lot. Citrus is amazing from an anti-inflammatory perspective. There are so many powerful antioxidants in citrus, and they're wrapped up in acid, which is really great for our system, because our system is acidic essentially. And so you get these great aromatic oils from the peel, you get the phytonutrients and the antioxidants from the juice, and it's just a really great power play of anti-inflammatory nutrition. So that's limes, that's lemons, that's oranges even, but then you get into some of the sugar. So limes and lemons are some of my favorite things. Then we're going to do a whole avocado, and it says medium avocado, so that's like one of these little guys. If you're using a Costco avocado, it might be a little too big, but just scoop the whole thing in there. Avocados are another kind of superfood, I would say, when it comes to anti-inflammation because you're getting healthy fats. So our cells are made of fats. We need some fat to make sure that our immune cells can actually function. But it's these unsaturated fats from plants that really are our favorites. Our cells really use them really beautifully. But what's cool about avocado is it also has fiber. It's not just a fat like a lot of the other fat sources. So you're getting about 5 grams of fiber per half avocado. That's a lot of fiber. And fiber of probably all the ingredients and nutrients out there in superfoods is my favorite because we're not eating enough. And when we do eat more, we see better cholesterol. We see better inflammatory markers. We see better blood sugar. So fiber is super important and you get it in this non-crunchy, non-hard form in an avocado. So that's kind of cool. We're going to do some seasonings. So we're going to do some garlic powder. It's about a half to a whole teaspoon, depending on how powerful you like all these flavors. So onion powder, garlic powder, and some sea salt. Is that all that I do in here? Yeah. Where's my sea salt? And then the creme de la creme is our cilantro. So I know that the description of this class was like, here's my top 3 ingredients, but I know I have a ton of favorite anti-inflammatory ingredients. But truly one of my favorites is herbs. So parsley, basil, cilantro, dill, even chives are kind of in that category. They have all of the nutrition of those big other plants like broccoli and cauliflower boiled down into these tiny little herb leaves. So you get these cool glucosinolates that you get from broccoli, and you get some of the sulfur compounds that you get from onions, and they're all powerfully packed into this tiny little amount. So you get a lot of bang for your buck. So what a lot of research has shown is you get the same anti-inflammatory benefit from just 2 tablespoons of cilantro that you get from an entire cup of broccoli. So it's a really great way, especially if you do have tummy troubles, or maybe you don't have a lot of appetite because you just had the flu. It's a really great way to get a lot of anti-inflammatory benefit from a very little amount. And that's my favorite thing, is how can we just add a tiny little bit to our diet to have these huge benefits? And herbs is where it's at. So if you can get 2 tablespoons of herbs every single day, hallelujah, your body and your blood are yaying and partying. So I have some cilantro here. Cilantro and parsley are very similar to each other in their nutritional makeup. They're very, very anti-inflammatory. They have a ton of those glucosinolates. And they're really yummy, in my opinion. My blades. And we're just going to blend. So you could do this in a food processor for ease today because we're doing so much blending. I'm just kind of using all of my individual smoothie cups. So it might take me an extra second for this to blend because it's more of a smoothie cup than a food processor, but hang with me. Go again. And it should be thick. This is a dip. So we're not looking for a liquid smoothie here, which is why a food processor is slightly easier to make this happen. But yeah, it should be nice and thick. This is a great recipe for St. Patrick's Day in a couple of months because it's nice and green. And then you just taste too. So taste it, and before you pour it out into a bowl, does it need more salt? Does it need more cilantro? Does it need more lime juice? Totally make this your own. Maybe you want some green onion in there, but this flavor profile pairs so nicely with the tofu. So the original recipe for the tofu is once it's done, we toss it with buffalo sauce. So it's kind of like instead of buffalo wild wings, you have buffalo tofu. My family doesn't love buffalo sauce. My kids, it's a little too spicy. So we end up using like a Korean barbecue sauce. This brand, Primal Kitchen, You can get it from Primal Kitchen website. A lot of stores, Sprouts, Whole Foods, Mothers, they sell this brand now. But you could use a regular barbecue sauce. You could use this Korean barbecue sauce that has a little bit more of an Asian flair. And what we're going to do is once that tofu is totally done baking, we're just going to stir it up with a couple tablespoons of sauce and let it sit. And so now we have this yummy, saucy tofu that we're going to dip in this really powerfully limey cilantro sauce. And it's delicious. And it can be a snack. It can be lunch. If you're thinking kind of Super Bowl, which is coming up around the corner, you could put this with your buffalo tofu and some carrot sticks and cilantro on a plate. And there's your plant-based option on your big table. And you could also do buffalo chicken wild wings on the side of it. But you have this anti-inflammatory dip. Think outside the box on your dips too. You could use this as a salad dressing if you have leftover. You could smear this over, let's say, a chicken breast or salmon and bake it. And then you have this really delicious outer coating on something else that you're making. So think that through too when you're doing homemade sauces and condiments. There's so much more you can do with them to add this powerful nutrition to that next thing that you're making and not just as a dip for your tofu. Okay, so there's recipe number 1. And what we're going to do is we're going to actually move to the stove. You're going to move with me over there and we're going to make soup. So before we move, let me catch some questions because I saw a bunch coming in. Cilantro, dried cilantro, as good as fresh, and are fresh herbs. Oh, okay. So you both had the same question. Dried versus fresh cilantro. Both fantastically healthy, and it's kind of the question of frozen fruit versus fresh. You actually do get the same nutritional benefits in dried versus fresh. The caveat being dried herbs do go bad, and I think it's really, really common for us to just keep those jars in our pantries for years sometimes. So watch the expiration dates, and even more than the expiration dates, do the smell test. If it doesn't smell pretty powerfully like cilantro, if it's dried cilantro, it's no longer super beneficial or powerful. It doesn't mean it's bad for you. You can still use it and get a little bit of flavor, but it's not giving you that same anti-inflammatory benefit if it doesn't smell really powerfully like that herb. So those are really good questions. Okay, we are going to move. So give me a moment because this is my really cool setup. You're going to see my background. My kids' train boxes are what allow you to be up high enough to see the soup happening. So let's move. Boop, 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 boop. Okay, welcome to my stove. All right, let me grab my recipe. So next up, and just a heads up, the oven's gonna beep here in a minute for the tofu, so I'll have to shake that up. What we're gonna do next is my own favorite version of like a chicken noodle soup, because that's everyone's favorite thing to have when they are sick, and we are looking to up that, to do culinary medicine version of chicken noodle soup. So what we're gonna do first, I should have made our curry first. Sorry, guys. We're going to go backwards for a second. I apologize. We have to make the little saucy thing first. Okay. First, we have to make our saucy thing. Then we put it in the soup. I haven't made this one on screen before, so that's why I'm all mixed up. Okay. Let's make our little sauce first. So we're going to do garlic, ginger, and shallots. I'm just going to use garlic powder. So a little bit of just like background knowledge is if you get IBS symptoms from garlic, you can probably do ground garlic no problem. So a lot of people react to some of the sulfur compounds in garlic and it gives them kind of the burps, like almost like acid reflux. If that's you, as it is me, you can almost always tolerate garlic granules or dried garlic because it's already been broken down for us. Those little sulfur compounds are already broken down. So the recipe does call for fresh 4 cloves of garlic. I just can't use that. So I'm going to use garlic granules, and that's more tolerable for me. Hang on one sec. Just going to stir our tofu. They're looking yummy. Another 15 minutes there. And I also realized I never took my shallots out of the fridge. My goodness. The shallot. I cut them all up last night. I'll probably find them later. Okay. We're gonna use, so I did some ground garlic, ginger, onion, shallots. These are all considered alliums. They're roots. They're really incredibly powerful because they have a sulfur compound. And so that's why sometimes they can give us some GI distress, but that's also really beneficial for our immune system. So if you were going to pick like two of the most powerful bang for your buck types of foods for immune health, it would be herbs and it would be alliums. Because there, again, you just need a tiny little bit to give you a whole heck of a lot. So if you can get 2 tablespoons of herbs a day and 2 tablespoons, 3 tablespoons of allium per day, so onion, garlic, ginger, shallot, green onion, all of fennel, that is going to be really powerful for your immune system. So I've got my garlic. I'm going to add a little ginger. I just bought pre-chopped ginger today, because that was easier for me. And anything spicy like ginger, like peppers, capsaicin, those are also great for our immune system because they make our nose run. They're making everything fluid run around. So anything spicy is also good for you if you can tolerate that. All right, so we had 4 cloves of garlic. We had ginger. For some reason, I can't find my roughly chopped shallots that I chopped this morning, but we would normally put that in there. We want lime juice again. We're going to do 2 teaspoons of lime juice. Add a little bit more because I think it tastes really good. We talked about lime juice. And then we're going to add all these herbs. Again, herbs and spices are so powerful. So we're going to add about 2 teaspoons of each of cumin. And go wild on these. If you like the flavors, add more. We're going to add some turmeric, about 2 teaspoons of turmeric. Turmeric has a ton of research around being anti-inflammatory, especially for things like arthritis and joint pain. Now, you do have to have quite a bit of turmeric for it to have a medicinal effect, but if you can get it daily, you're getting that little bit of effect every day. And if you are someone who does have arthritis, let's say, you might want to take a capsule where you have a concentrated amount. We're going to add a little bit of coriander also, just about a teaspoon of the coriander, not quite as much. It's a pretty powerful flavor. But all these spices are giving us an anti-inflammatory benefit, where in all the research we see if you have lots of herbs and spices, you are bringing that inflammatory CRP marker down. Okay, we've got our cumin, turmeric, coriander, lime juice. We are now going to add about a 1/4 cup of olive oil or coconut oil or avocado oil, any of the above. Get your blades. This is going to make a little bit of a paste. So think of it kind of like a curry paste in a way that we're going to use as our starter for our soup, which is why I moved you back over here. You could just saute this in the pan and it would be fine also. This is a nice way for you to make it ahead of time. Okay, if you're someone who likes to meal prep, you basically created your own little curry paste. You could use curry paste if you want to. All right, and now we are going to move over to the stove. We'll get there. Thank you for hanging with me. Okay, so we have all those herbs and spices that we just mixed up with a carrier oil. So I didn't mention this, but in all of our herbs and spices, the antioxidants are all fat soluble. Okay, so they need to be with the fat to be absorbed. So if you're just having turmeric, by itself, and you're not having it with an oil, you're not absorbing a lot of those phytonutrients and antioxidants, okay? So it's really important that when you have these herbs and spices, there's some source of fat. That's why we added the olive oil, so that we can help it get absorbed. Now we're going to put this into a soup that also has fat, so I'm not too worried about it if you skip that blending step, and if you just saute those spices here in the pan, that's fine too. Okay. So I'm heating up my pan, and I'm going to pour in my little curry sauce here, which, because I used a lot of powdered seasonings, again, wasn't the most essential step ever. But if you were using ginger root and turmeric root and real garlic, you'd maybe want to puree that a little bit more, again, because that breaks it down. It's easier to digest than having those chunks of all those things in your soup. So we're going to let that saute a little bit. Already starting to heat up, which I love. Left my coconut oil over there, or my coconut milk, I mean. Okay, so once that starts to heat, which it already has, we're gonna add, yes, more herbs, more anti-inflammatory spices. So I have about 2 large green onions already chopped. I'm gonna add those guys in. And another 1/3 of a cup-ish of cilantro, I'm gonna add that in. And I have it on like medium low. I don't want to burn any of these things. I just kind of want to get them going a little bit. Okay, and let me get into my fridge here. Found my shallots. I knew I would. So we're going to add them in here. They should have been in the puree. Shallots are nice because they're a little bit sweeter than an onion. There's a part of a shallot. So just a slightly more tolerable sometimes if you don't tolerate onion, but they have that same anti-inflammatory power punch. I'm also going to add in some bell pepper. Your original recipe calls for serrano peppers in the original blend that you made. That's another thing that my kids don't love, is the spiciness of serrano pepper. So I use bell pepper just in the soup instead, because bell pepper is another amazing source of fiber and antioxidants, and it just gives a nice flavor and texture to the soup itself. But know that the recipe will call for spicy peppers blended into that curry paste. So just stir and cook just like a minute or two. You don't need a whole heck of a lot. It's starting to smell amazing. And we're going to add our liquids. So I have this can of light coconut milk. I do recommend the light coconut milk for this recipe, not whole coconut milk, full fat, because we're going to add bone broth and chicken. We're getting plenty of fats, and the full fat coconut milk can make it really oily tasting. So I'm not anti full fat coconut milk in some cases, but in this case you want light. The recipe calls for a full can. I used about 1/3 of a can in that other recipe, and it's totally fine. If you don't have an entire can, even if you only use half, it still gives it that creamy effect. But here is my favorite. I usually cook with homemade bone broth. I usually make a full chicken maybe once a month, and then I use that carcass to make my own bone broth, and you can put all kinds of all those things that I just told you about, the onions and the carrots and the alliums and the herbs into the bone broth, and then you soak it up via broth. Of course, I didn't have any more in my freezer because I've used it all with this cold season. So I did just buy Pacific brand bone broth, which is kind of my go-to boxed bone broth. This and Fond, F-O-N-D. Those are my 2 favorite pre-made broth brands, because sometimes you just need to buy a pre-made one. We're going to use the whole box, which is about 4 cups. And as I'm doing this, I just want to, again, reinforce how incredible bone broth can be, especially when you're sick, or especially if you have gut issues, because it's in that liquid form, and you can put literally anything you want in the broth itself, and it'll all soak into the water. So if you've ever made bone broth, you know that when you take the stuff out, when you strain it, those vegetables have no more flavor, right? They're completely devoid of flavor. It's because it's all in the liquid. So you can add all kinds of stuff. And what I usually do is, as I'm cooking for the week, if I have onion peel and offcuts of carrots and celery, the stuff I'm not going to eat, all of that can go into your bone broth. And it's just going to soak up. So you get all the nutrients from the onion peel and the garlic stems and all of that. And you just let it cook together. And then you're cooking with that amazingly powerful broth. And I see someone asking, how do you get the recipes? I will be emailing them to you if you are registered. Some of my Mount Sac friends, they will be posted on your wellness website. And then you just bring this to a boil and you let it simmer. And it really doesn't need a whole lot of cook time because we've already done all that processing. We've blended up the curries. There's not a lot going on here. I happen to have pre-done chicken. This is, again, something I usually do on my own, is I usually make a whole bunch of shredded chicken. Just didn't have time this week. My kiddo was sick and all of that. So I bought some pre-shredded chicken from Sprouts. It's not pasture raised. I wish it was, but most of the time the proteins that we're having here are pasture raised and grass fed in this house. And so I'm not too worried about just having to throw this in this time around. So I just bought this pre-shredded chicken. There's nothing else in it but chicken on the ingredient list. And now we're having some good protein. Chicken has some really cool things in their bones too that are full of collagen. So we get some collagen from eating chicken. And once this gets simmering, I'm going to throw the chicken in, I'm going to turn it on low and let it simmer for like 15 minutes. And then it's done. It's the fastest soup. And you can eat it as is, or you can add noodles to it. You can add any noodle you want. We kind of like adding soba noodles to it because it's almost got sort of a pho soup flair to it when we do that. And soba is nice because it's made of buckwheat. Some soba noodles will have regular wheat and buckwheat, so you do have to be careful if you have a gluten intolerance. This brand, the Lotus Foods, it's brown rice flour and buckwheat, so it is totally gluten-free. And I just cook this separately and throw it in when I'm ready to eat it. If you are super low carb, you could go without the noodles, and that would be perfectly fine too. But now we have a totally anti-inflammatory soup with protein that you can add more carb to if you like. Okay, so I'm just going to let that simmer and do its thing while we move back to our stage here. And we're going to make one more recipe together while we wait for that tofu to come out of the oven. Okay. Plug in our light so you can see me a little bit better. This is why I need a crew, a stage crew, so I don't have to move everybody around on my own. Okay. How are we? Good. So we have one more recipe. We're going to do something sweet. We're going to do chocolate raspberry chia bowls because we don't want just savory. We got to have a little bit of sweetness in our lives. So I've got, again, my little smoothie cup. You could do it in a food processor. You could do it in a blender. What I love about chia bowls, or smoothie bowls, if you will, is you can, again, put nutritional things in the original smoothie and then use that smoothie to make your oatmeal, to make your chia bowl. And you have all this hidden glorious stuff in there in the liquid part of it, rather than just using milk to make your oatmeal or milk to make your chia bowls. Okay, so we're going to do 3/4 cup of your favorite milk. It could be cow milk, it can be coconut milk. I am a huge fan of macadamia nut milk because it's a healthy source of fat. And I like that. And it tastes really creamy. And it's unsweetened. So anytime you're getting like a non-cow's milk, if you're someone who likes almond milk or whatever it is, just make sure you're getting unsweetened milk. And I'm doing a double batch because my kids love this recipe and we're going to have it for breakfast tomorrow. So I have a little over a cup there. Well, and we're going to add some glucosinolates from kale and spinach because we're blending it up, and we're going to add some chocolate. So we're going to cover up the green color later with some chocolate, and why not add some powerful nutrition, right? Anytime I can add in some greens or some herbs and not taste it or know about it, even better, because you're just getting this secret nutrition. So about a cup's worth, just kind of shove it in. It can be spinach, it can be kale. It doesn't matter. They're all nutritious. Oh, there's our tofu. Hang on. I don't want that to burn. All these look good. I'll show those two in a second. We're also going to get some glucosinolates and sulfur compounds from riced cauliflower. We're going to add that in too. Because again, why not make this a superfood? If you're home and you're like, I don't have cauliflower rice, I just have spinach, then just add the spinach. It's not a problem. But we're just seeing if we can maximize nutrition wherever we can in this. So some cauliflower, you don't want to do too much because the cauliflower taste will come out. So like no more than a quarter cup per serving. I did a little more than that, but again, I'm doubling mine. Okay, we're going to do some flax seeds. Flax seeds, like herbs, any seeds are really powerful. If you think of it, if you plant one little broccoli seed in the ground, that turns into an entire broccoli plant. So all of the nutrition of that broccoli plant was in that itty bitty little seed. That's why seeds are awesome for nutritional power, because they have all that nutrition packed into the seed, but you do have to break through the seed to get it. So if you have some tummy troubles, doing things like whole flax seeds may not be the best option because you might not be able to break that flax seed down. So ground flax seed is key. And again, you don't need very much. 1 to 2 tablespoons is all you need. Some cinnamon, because it tastes delish. I don't want coriander, cinnamon. But also cinnamon is another herb that's got anti-inflammatory benefit. It's good for our blood sugar. And then we're going to add some protein powder. I like this brand called Just Ingredients. That's what the brand is called, Just Ingredients, because that's all they put in their protein powders are just the real ingredients, and you're not getting other things. So I was testing them out, so I have all these little tester packets, but they do sell big amounts, and they have all kinds of flavors that are flavored with either stevia or monk fruit. So I'm adding the chocolate. And they have this like flavor tester pack that you can get on their website, which is what I did, because I was like, I don't know what flavor I want. They have Dutch chocolate, they have chocolate brownie, what's the difference? So that's why I have this little guy here. But okay, we did our milk, we did our spinach, we did our cauliflower rice, cinnamon, flax seeds, protein powder. Let's blend. The lightest protein powder I've ever worked with that's chocolate, because it is still kind of green. I thought that was light coming out of there. Usually if you have a dark chocolate protein powder, this is going to be brown. I don't care, my kids won't care as long as it tastes good, but just know if you get the Just Ingredients chocolate protein powder, it's a fairly light powder. You will end up with green. The reason I like adding protein powder is because a lot of times when we make oatmeal or chia puddings, there isn't a good source of protein there. We're maybe getting some healthy fats and some good fiber, but we're not always getting protein. And when we eat breakfast and we don't have a good source of protein, it stimulates insulin resistance for the rest of the day, which is an inflammatory marker. So we do want to make sure that our breakfast has a good source of protein in it, and blending protein into your milk, even if you don't do all the seeds and everything. Your milk mixed with protein is a really great way to just get protein in your day. And someone says my volume lowered. Am I just not speaking up? Hopefully that's a little bit better. I don't know why it would have lowered. But we are going to add our smoothie, our super smoothie here, to a jar. And then add chia seeds. So chia, like flax, are very good sources of protein, omega-3s, which are anti-inflammatory, and fiber. And for 1 serving we would add 2 tablespoons, but again, I doubled mine, so I'm going to add 4 tablespoons. And if you've never made chia pudding before, that's literally all you do, is you just mix chia seeds with a liquid and you stir it up. And the key is to stir it a couple of times, like let it sit for a couple of minutes and then stir it again, because the chia will kind of rise to the top and then you might have something that's separated. So stir it, let it sit, come back and stir it, and then put it in the fridge overnight. And in the morning, we're going to top this with some raspberries. Berries are very anti-inflammatory, all berries. Maybe some cacao nibs, some unsweetened coconut flakes, some nuts, some walnuts. All of these have anti-inflammatory processes. And we have now a really healthy, nourishing, high-protein meal that you could potentially even have for dessert, even though I know it's green. It would normally be brown. But it does taste like chocolate in there. Also just really pretty, again, when it looks chocolatey. It would be a really pretty dessert if you top it with some whipped cream and some berries as well. What else was I going to tell you about this one? You could also do this with oats. If you are not a chia pudding fan, but you're more of an overnight oat fan, you can mix oats in instead of the chia, about 1/4 cup of oats to the one recipe. That would be another way to do it. But I love chia pudding. Chia has a really cool property called mucilaginous, where when it mixes with water, it gets kind of that gelatinous texture. And that gelatinous texture helps heal the gut lining, which heals inflammation and things like leaky gut. So that's another reason why I love chia, in addition to it being kind of like a low carb, higher protein, high fat meal. And this is, again, a preference thing. If you eat this and you're like, it's a little too liquidy, add another spoonful of chia seeds. If you eat it and it's too thick, we make it with more liquid next time. Top it with some granola to kind of balance that out. So you can make these your own. So I will be sending everyone these recipes, but today we made, oh, let me show it to you. Baked tofu. Okay, yum. They're these crispy little baked tofus. So when I'm ready to eat, I'm not going to do it right now because I'm not going to eat these. When I'm ready to eat, I'm going to put these in a bowl and I'm going to toss them with my sauce, whether that's buffalo sauce or my Korean barbecue sauce, just like a couple spoonfuls. And if you do it too far in advance, they get kind of soggy again. But if you like no more than an hour before you're going to eat, toss it with the sauce and then dip it in your cilantro ranch. It is so good, so tasty. We made our ginger chicken noodle soup, ginger garlic chicken noodle soup, and we made a chocolate that looks green chia pudding with raspberries. So that's what we did today. What other questions do you have? Let me get to the question box. For the homemade and store-bought chicken bone broth, do you use organic chicken? When I make my own, yes. So I prefer, in the hierarchy of needs, I prefer pasture raised even more than organic, because organic simply means that chicken is eating a feed that is organic, but it doesn't mean that the chicken is ever out of the hen house, walking around, being treated well. So pasture raised chickens mean they are out of the hen house in the sun, eating what they should. You have a very healthy chicken, independent of if it was eating organic food or not. So that's what I look for in poultry, anything, whether it's eggs or chicken or turkey. I'm looking for pasture raised. So I do buy pasture raised chickens, whole chickens. And then I plop it in the Instant Pot or my slow cooker with some water and lemon and herbs, cook it up, and then shred it. And I use then that carcass for another broth later on. So yes, I do look for that. If I can find pasture raised bone broth, I will. It's a lot harder to find. So I usually will then lean on organic for that. But like I said, I usually am making my own because it's so easy to make and then you can freeze it. Along the lines of dried herbs, does freezing fresh chopped herbs retain nutrition? You bet it does. Just like freezing fruits and vegetables, you freeze at that time of freezing. So if you freeze kind of like old wilty basil, you won't have as much nutrition. But if you freeze fresh basil, yep, you're freezing it right there at the time of freezing. So you're getting lots of nutrition. You're welcome. You're welcome. Cage-free is pasture-raised. No, it is not. Good question. There are lots of labels that you will find on poultry and on meat They all mean something different and they all are regulated differently. So cage free simply means that the door to the hen house must remain open a certain amount of time during the day. And I don't know what those hours are, but let's even say it's 20 hours of the day the hen house door is remained open. Cage free doesn't have anything to do with how many chickens are shoved into that hen house and what they're being fed. So you might have some really fat, unhealthy chickens that can't get out of the hen house. So just because the door's open doesn't mean anything. So cage free is kind of like, doesn't really mean much. Free range means that the hens have access to the field, from my understanding. It's kind of a very broad term and it's not regulated, but free range means that they can get out and there is a certain amount of time during the week that they're supposed to get out, but really loosely regulated. Again, organic really only means the food that the chicken is eating is organic, has nothing to do with the chicken or the chicken's health. And then pasture raised is where the chickens during their normal awake time are out of the hen house in a pasture eating what is in the pasture. So pasture raised doesn't always mean organic. It doesn't mean that that pasture maybe doesn't have spray on it. You'd want to see organic pasture raised if you want both of those things. But pasture raised means that the chicken during the majority of its day is walking around in the sun, eating seeds and bugs and dirt, exercising, and then going back into the hen house in the evening. That's what pasture raised means. So you're getting a moving, sunshine, eating what it's supposed to eat animal. And the same goes for grass-fed when it comes to ruminant animals. So cows and bison, grass-fed means pasture-raised. Can you freeze the tofu meal? I have never had good luck freezing tofu, ever. So I don't know if anyone else has input on that. Maybe I'm doing it wrong, but every time I've frozen tofu, it just doesn't come out right. So I wouldn't recommend it. But if anybody has input on that, feel free. That's all you guys got for me. Okay, so I will send the recording and the recipes to everyone registered. I will try and get that out by end of day today. It might be tomorrow. And for my Mount Sac friends, that will be posted on your wellness website as well. And if you are not yet registered, I invite you to register for our anti-inflammatory series that starts tomorrow. It's a 5-part series with me. They will be lunch and learns at noon every Thursday for 5 weeks. And we'll go over nutrition and movement and sleep and stress resilience and all the things that I started to talk about with food today in webinar form. So that series is $50 for the whole series, and you can register online. And I do see one more question. You're welcome, Nancy. Do you know of any good books on anti-inflammatory eating and living? I'm thinking about the book and I am blanking. Good Energy is a newer book. It's very thick and very dense and has a lot of research in it. And it's pretty extremist, I would say, but it's good information. And so Good Energy is great if you're really into the science and if you're willing to take a step backward and realize that you don't have to do everything the author is recommending, because the author, it can be a little overwhelming if you're reading it like, I have to do all these things, but they are all gold standard. So that can be a good one. Trying to think if there's a more kind of like leveled down anti-inflammatory book. Anything by Mark Hyman is always going to be good. He's pretty realistic in how he approaches things. Will Cole is another good author, C-O-L-E. He has a great book on kind of doing low carbon fasting in an anti-inflammatory, more realistic way. So those are kind of some of my favorite authors and people out in the world. All right, you're welcome. All righty. Well, thank you for joining me, everyone. Hopefully I see a lot of you as we kick off the series tomorrow. And if not, we have webinars and cooking classes all the time. We have a webinar on how to track your health that's free in February. That's our February topic. And then there will be a March topic and a March cooking class. The next cooking class will be in March. And until then, thank you so much. I will see you all soon. Have a great day. Bye, everyone.